ADDitude team, I'm pleased to welcome you to today's ADHD experts presentation titled Invisible Disabilities at Work: How to Foster Neurodivergent Advocacy and Acceptance. Leading today's presentation is Jessica Hicksted. Diagnosed as an adult with autism spectrum disorder and ADHD, Jessica brings her life experiences and education to advocate for people with invisible disabilities. She has faced many challenges, including sustaining injuries during her military service, which she overcame with resiliency and determination. She is a mother to 2 sons with ADHD and autism spectrum disorder. Jessica has faced her own battles with discrimination in the workplace after disclosing her disabilities. She returned to graduate school to become an effective advocate for positive social change. Through her PhD studies in industrial organizational psychology, she has dedicated her research to invisible disabilities in the workplace and developed a tool for employers to measure stigma associated with this disclosure. In today's webinar, Jessica will discuss the pros and cons of disclosing one's disabilities at work, how to search for a job in a more inclusive workplace, and how to advocate for yourself. We'd like to begin today's webinar by asking this poll question to our live audience. Have you faced discrimination at work because of your disability? Please select your answers and comment in the text box under the video player to tell us more. You will see the poll results when you submit your response. While you do that, I'll point out that live participants may submit questions anytime during the live event. To download the slides, click on the Event Resources section of your webinar screen. If you're interested in the Certificate of Attendance option, look for instructions in the email you'll receive about an hour after the live broadcast. A transcript of today's event will be made available in the coming week. If you're listening in replay or podcast mode, visit ADDitudemag.com and search podcast number 443 to access the slides, the webinar replay, the Certificate of Attendance option, and the webinar transcript. If you support the work we're doing here at ADDitude to strengthen the ADHD community, we encourage you to visit ADDitudemag.com/subscribe to sign up for our latest spring issue. Our cover story, The ADHD Guide to Love, will deepen your bond with your partner and give you strategies to overcome common challenges. You'll also learn why women and girls with ADHD are often misdiagnosed and the troubling consequences that follow. And if you've wondered whether brain training to improve ADHD symptoms is worth the cost, our experts provide answers. Sign up now for your family or to share with a teacher or a loved one who could benefit from greater ADHD understanding. And for listeners who are new to adult ADHD, perhaps you're an employer or a manager, you can visit ADDitudemag.com and click on our feature article, The Adult ADHD Mind, Executive Function Connections, to help you better understand how ADHD affects the brain. Finally, the sponsor of this webinar is Inflow. Inflow is the #1 app to help you manage your ADHD. Developed by leading clinicians, Inflow is a science-based self-help program based on the principles of cognitive behavioral therapy. Join Inflow today to better understand and manage your ADHD. Click the link on the screen to learn more. ADDitude thanks our sponsors for supporting our webinars. Sponsorship has no influence on speaker selection or webinar content. So without further ado, I'm so pleased to welcome Jessica Hicksted. Thank you so much for joining us today and for leading this discussion.
Thank you, Carol. It is an honor to be here. And to the audience, thank you for coming. So today, like Carol said, we're going to talk about invisible disabilities at work and how we're fostering neurodivergent advocacy and acceptance. So today, I'm going to go over masking, interviewing, disclosure, advocacy, And then the lastly is research, the current research that's available, as well as my new research that I just developed. So masking is a big topic because what masking does, it inhibits your executive functions. When you're hiding any identifiers and information and avoiding situations that may make your condition apparent, that is masking or hiding, camouflaging, blending, acting, many names it could go by. When you're masking, you have a constant need to assess your situation. It requires a conscious awareness of your surroundings. And during that constant need, you have to adjust and assess, and it takes so much energy. It ends up having a cost to your own well-being. This can show up as illnesses, stress, concentration loss, productivity loss. When you are using a part of your brain to mask, you are using that executive function to use up brain power instead of just being you and doing your job. So this increased stress, it expends energy with every new social interaction. So thus we have burnout. We have, downtime. It just really weighs down. I mean, personally, and I am still learning to unmask every day. I'm learning to be unapologetic for who I am, trying to stop saying sorry, but just saying thank you for your patience, and letting people know that this is how I am, and it doesn't seem to have a problem. I actually just got promoted in my workplace, so it's working, I guess, finally. And it is uncomfortable to hide yourself. Now that I'm more aware of it myself, when I'm sitting there and I catch myself masking, I realize, oh, that's why I'm so tired and exhausted. If I just let myself be me and do my work, it's a lot better well-being. I don't have that stress. I don't get snappy. So it is something to be very conscious about. So like I said, the cost to the individual, you get a high cost despite helping it navigate your day without attracting to any disability. You have to be aware of that negative cost to yourself. When the time you're spent doing masking, you got to realize that you're not able to invest in other kinds of personal development. If you're using your energy up to mask and try to not be who you really are, you can't work on those other development steps. That is one thing that I truly learned and took to heart when I learned to just let go of that and be like, okay, I'm me. I may fidget. I let workplaces know I'm lucky to work at home now. But when I did still work in person, if we had meetings, I'd tell them, hey, I'm going to go stand up and back. I don't do well just sitting down. And if I, leave to go to the bathroom, it's just I needed a break. And people understood. When I put that out there, out front, it made a much more understanding. And like I said, if you keep the masking up, you're going to have that burnout, that stress. And also when you have high masking, you get misdiagnosis. Hence, as Carol had mentioned earlier, in women, we are much more prone to masking, and we go misdiagnosed very often. I wasn't diagnosed until after my own kids were. And I know there's many, many stories like that. On the other end of the cost to the organization, when you have workers that are feeling they need a mask and hide who they truly are, like I said, it's using that executive function, and it is reducing workplace performance. So we want to promote people to be who they are, not have to mask, not have to hide, and letting them use their full potential. Also, it'll reduce the burnout, it will reduce absenteeism, will reduce turnover. So when you're letting people be who they are, and just produce, you have a much more accepting environment. We are going to, diminish all those negative attitudes that happen. So how do we tell if a workplace is accepting, is going to be advocate, is really a place for you to be? So there's some interview questions that I've learned and used as I've worked into different places. And it's taken, a lot of life trials and errors to find these. So to find your organization, you have a climate and culture within an organization. Every organization is going to be a little different, and trying to learn that, they have vision statements, they have mission statements. So reading through those, getting to know them. I mean, most businesses have websites, but how do you really truly get to know them versus the face they're trying to put on? Excuse me. So in an organization, stigmas and stereotypes remain a leading perception of weakness and frailty in individuals with invisible disabilities, individuals with disabilities overall. Despite ADA and other anti-discrimination laws, they remain the leading perception that individuals with disabilities are weak, frail, or incompetent. And we've got to fight that. And it's being strength in numbers that we're going to get there. Combating negative effects of stereotyping and stigmas, it requires positive attitudes and a supportive environment. And that's what we need. I mean, I don't want to go work somewhere that people just are there to make money and get out of there. So one way organizations is if they're looking from situation from the perspective of an employee, looking at it as don't blame the employee for, decreases in productivity. See what's going on, see the whole person, and see how we can improve things. If we take the world, to look at that in the organization, and it'll improve and be beneficial for everyone. Once we have acceptance, that increases productivity, and it will increase the money flow for everyone. So some of the questions I've come up with are like, what types of yearly training does the organization complete? And you may get all kinds of, answers, but it's truly taking the time to listen. And we've got to remember when we're interviewing, you get to interview the company as much as they're interviewing you. You want to know that this is a place you want to be. They're going to accept you. It's going to be, a good balance. That's the whole work-life balance. You don't want to just go to a place and, well, I need money. We all need money. We know that. But if you are truly working somewhere where you're accepted and enjoying it, it is mind-blowing, to say the least. I've unfortunately been in a place when I started this degree, I was at a workplace that was probably the worst out of all my experiences. They really worked to make my life, make me want to quit or find a way to fire me once I told them, I disclosed my disabilities. Because I was having trouble in the workplace, trouble concentrating, trouble getting tasks done. And so I disclosed, asking for help, and things kind of blew up from there. And I found a way out. Another question is, how does the company support work-life balance? So as a company, are they offering parental leave? What kind of leave do they offer? What kind of activities do they promote? Really listen to their answers. Are employees required to attend social gatherings? I like this one because being autistic, as much as a lot of times it sounds fun to go out and be with people, it's very uncomfortable for me. I really still mask a lot, so it makes me exhausted, and it ends up not being fun. So it's nice to know, is this workplace, make it mandatory for you to go to big gatherings? And then go off their answer of, what they say to gauge how that feels for you. What types of diversity and inclusion teams does the company host? And you'll get a ton of different answers. I've been in several different workplaces, and each one has a little bit of difference of their DEI teams. but listen to them, see what kind of, things they're promoting, how they're helping, what they're listening to. Next one, how perspective is the company to new ideas, different perspectives, change? Is this company stuck in their ways? Are they, innovative? Are they looking for change? That's another one, to really listen. And these questions can be asked without disclosing your own disabilities or anything. It is just a good way to kind of gauge, like I said, their climate and culture. So another one is, how does this company support personal differences? So this one is really good because you do have a lot of different personality, and you're going to get the perspective of the individuals that are interviewing you, but it should give you a very good perspective of the workplace overall. What kind of flexible work arrangements does the company support? This one's really good because now, thanks to the pandemic, we do have the ability to work from home. Sometimes work from home full-time, sometimes have a flex schedule. So see if that's available to you and how that works for you. Again, what kind of flexible working environments does the company support? Are you stuck in a cubicle and that's all they allow? Do they have, different areas, private areas, enclosed areas, open areas? Getting an idea of what your work environment's going to be before you commit to a job is really important, because some of us work well in quiet, enclosed, dark, dim lights, and some of us are, like to be surrounded by things. So it's really learning to listen to this. Do you believe in reasonable accommodations to improve your workforce? Now, this one could kind of be a disclosure, so that's up to you how to ask it. But it also gives a good idea, and remember to look at facial expressions when you ask these questions of the individual before they answer it, and see how they answer it. Do they deflect it that you need to go talk to EEO, or are they open to giving you an answer? So like I said, now we have the disclosure part of the workplace. And there are strategies to determine whether and how you're going to disclose in your disability in the workplace. And it is a big question. You got to remember, if you're disclosing, that means you're not having a mask. It's going to preserve your well-being. You are protected by ADA laws. Even in states where it's the right to work, you still have ADA laws. Those don't go away. You do have to have proper, any kind of documentation stuff to show that, because yes, in a right to work, they can put down whatever reason of why they let you go. But if you truly feel it was for a discriminatory reason, you always have the right to contact ADA. The other thing we have to remember is, to get accommodations, you have to disclose. At this point in time, you have to go to your HR, you have to disclose your disability, you have to have documentation from a doctor of what your disability is, and go through the process. There are workplaces that won't make you go through those steps to give you some accommodations, and you have to work with them. Sometimes managers are very open, but you have to start that conversation and talk to them. Ask them, say, hey, this works for me. Can we work around that? So, and the sad part is, when you don't disclose and there is poor performance, the workplace has to think that that is due to a non-disability. And then that does hurt your performance report and how they grade you. So like I said, accommodations that we can ask for are simple. A lot of them don't even cost money. A lighting change, having different kinds of lightings. Personally, myself, if the workplace has the old neon tubes, I can literally hear the lights and it drives me nuts. So I'll always ask, hey, can we order some LED tubes? Makes a big difference. A lot of workplaces are going to LED now, so that is very nice. Workspace, like I said before, is having a workspace that you can close a door so you don't have so much distractions, or that is off into a corner that's not in a high traffic area, asking for something like that. Asking for an adjusted schedule, or asking for, reasonable that, hey, I will come in between this time to this time, and depending on the time I come in, I will work my 8 hours and leave. Is that okay? Because having ADHD, we know that time blindness happens, and being on time is a very hard thing to do. I've had many workplaces that, 5 minutes late and get written up. So ask them if they have a little bit of a flexible schedule. Another thing I've known is going into meetings, asking for a pre-meeting agenda. And a lot of times companies already have those, and they hand them out when you get to the meeting. So asking for it to be emailed you before the meeting so you can review it and be prepared and have any questions is very, very helpful. Receiving meeting notes. So afterwards, if there's someone that's taking the meeting minutes, which in most organizations is a requirement, asking those to be sent to you so you can, again, review what was gone over. Social interactions, are they required? Do you have to go to social interactions? Do they look down on you if you choose not to go to that, brunch and get together? Or, asking people as simple as a sign, work in progress, please come back at. Things like that can be done, does not cost money. Wearing headphones to keep out, the noise and distraction, not necessarily that you have any music on or anything, but just the headphones on to kind of minimize that. Ask the workplace if that's okay for you. Sometimes a white noise machine. And like I said before, a quiet space. Having an uninterrupted work time, like working with your manager and saying, hey, can I have 2 hours here from here to here? That's set. No one can schedule meetings. No one come into your office. No one come bother. So you can have that dedicated time to get some work done. So, use that great hyperfocus and work. Asking if you minimize marginal functions. Sometimes, we get those other functions of taking out the trash, or you need to go and photocopy these things for me. Just being open with your manager and asking if that's okay, that please don't assign me these little tasks, because it's hard to break up the workday sometimes. Mentors are always a great thing, and a lot of companies do offer this. They'll call them mentors, they'll call them coaches. Look into your organization and ask, see if they've got one. And number one, it helps you because you've got a person that could be an ally, even without disclosing, that helps you navigate through the workplace, how your organization works, especially when you're newer there. At the beginning of the day, write yourself a to-do list. Keep it simple and check things for expectations. Ask what they're looking for. It doesn't hurt to ask. So advocacy. Advocacy is super important. We need that acceptance. We need people to, help us fight, and we need to bond together and fight together. So workplace advocacy comes in many, many ways. We need to educate. We need people to understand what is going on with us, what is going on with all these invisible disabilities. Like I said, it's not just ADHD, it's autism, it's bipolar, it's depression, it's celiac disease. I could go on for days. There are so many different invisible disabilities that affect people in all kinds of different ways. So many people don't know that their conditions are supported, or could be afraid to ask. And like I said, the list is long, but even the ADA covers any disabling condition that has impact to daily functions. Flexibility. Employees set schedules, your work atmosphere, if you can work from home, help advocate for those different things, because it really makes a big difference in someone that is going through one or more types of invisible disability. Yes, from the outside, you can't see what's going on, But inside, there can be so many things going on, infecting and working for or against someone, that they have the will and want to work and are great workers, but need that flexibility to get that work done. So transparency. Be transparent with your own well-being. It's powerful within your team. Even if you are an ally that doesn't have any kind of disability, the well-being is important. It's important to show that, hey, I'm taking this day off. Really take the day off. Show your team that it is okay to take that time for themselves, to reset, to regather. And we need that in any kind of team atmosphere. I even tell my own kid here at home sometimes, if I'm overwhelmed, I'm like, hey, mom needs a timeout. And I go take my time, I go for a little walk, and I come back. I'm showing him that it's okay, that you get frustrated with something, go take a breath. Access. Have a streamlined way for employees to request, order, or pay for assistive devices. And like I said before, these aren't always things that cost money. Just have that route open. You don't even have to have, make it that they have to go and disclose. Have it open that if you would like different lighting, here's our options. If you would like to have a different work environment, here, here's things that work. Hey, headphones are okay to wear. It's letting them know that these things are okay. Having belonging. Acceptance builds a psychologically safe and thriving workplace. That's acceptance of everyone. And I really, truly believe that. It's not just for disabilities, it's for everything. No one ever knows what the person next to you is going through. And the more that we are accepting of everyone else's battles and accepting of our own, it is going to change the world. And feedback. Having open communication to gauge if this change is making any kind of difference. So it's keeping those open lines. It's making sure that we are able to talk to one another and be able to talk to one another without feeling like we're being constantly barraged or judged or anything else. Just having that true open door. So like I said, being an ally is super important. Stigmatized individuals, we may have difficulty self-advocating. We have those fears. They are alive and well, and until we know the people around us, we don't know what's going on. So the more we open up, the more we talk, the more we keep these lines of communication, break down all these barriers, it's going to promote disclosure, and it's going to promote a safe and sound and accepting environment. So like I said, I was going to talk about my research, and this is the thing I'm most excited for. Currently in research, there is no true quantifying of this problem. There's no tool, no instrument that can look at the number of individuals with invisible disabilities in the workplace and how stigma affects them. The only research I could find was something back from 2017, and it estimated employees with invisible disabilities 30 to 35%. And that was giving, and very hard to read into. I actually went back and read, and it looks like it may be more like they were saying 20%. There's nothing that shows how disclosure is affected by these. No quantifying information. And businesses to really truly see they need to have a change, they need those numbers. Organizations are very number driven. So without valid and reliable data, organizations can't quantify this issue, and they can't truly enact change. We can talk about it all day long, but if we don't have that number to say, well, this is where we are, let's do this, and let's see if it improves, not going to get there. So in my research, I call it the workplace stigma and invisible disabilities. I found, and it was 847 participants that I had, everywhere from 19 to 70 years old, every working class, every degree, from no degree all the way up to doctorates, 73.5% of employees, they identified or were diagnosed with having an invisible disability. This blew me out of the water. I knew that there was more of us than any of these numbers and any current research was showing. But to truly see this on paper, I still sit there and go, is this really it? I ran this number, I can't tell you how many times, 73.5%. We have strength in numbers. And yes, this isn't just ADHD. I consider all invisible disabilities. And I put them into 3 categories of physical, neurodivergent, and sensory. So it's anything, someone with some hearing loss, someone with some sight loss, that's your sensory. You have your neurodivergent, your autism, your ADHD, your bipolar, depression, anything that affects, the mentally. And then physical invisible disabilities. You have chronic pain, you have chronic illness, you have diabetes, celiacs, and the list goes on and on. Of those 73.5, 35% do not disclose, have never, ever disclosed. So that's a lot of people. That's a big part of an organization. Individuals with invisible disabilities view acceptance, ableism, and advocacy in the workplace as more negatively, according to their counterparts. So that is saying my research looked at those 3 aspects, and they rated those lower for the workplace than those without invisible disabilities. Why these are important, like we said, acceptance is needed. One of the lowest questions that even both parts said was that my workplace educates managers on invisible disability accommodations. That was rated lowest of all the acceptance questions. In the ableism factor, attitudes in my workplace toward invisible disability leave me feeling emotionally exhausted. It's reverse rated, so they rated that, up high. And then in advocacy, invisible disability inclusion in the workplace creates a strong organizational foundation of understanding. They rated that as important, and it got rated lowest of all of them. So the interesting thing that I found was that, rewind. The interesting thing was that in all of it, acceptance showed the highest importance in disclosure. So when there was more acceptance, people were more willing to disclose in their workplace. The next importance was advocacy. So having someone advocate, and then of course, not having ableism there would, result in more disclosure. So I'm very excited to keep working on this. This was just in a general population. It will be getting published into a journal shortly here. I'm having to write that up, and hopefully getting out into the world. So invisible disabilities, they pose a challenge to the individual. But what we're learning is that acceptance, understanding, and reasonable accommodations will remove those barriers in the workplace and be a benefit for everyone, for the worker and for the organization. So I thank you, and that's the conclusion, and I will be ready for the questions that they're going to present.
That was excellent. Thank you so much, Jessica. Before we start the Q&A, I'd like to thank Inflow once more for sponsoring this webinar. I'd also like to share the final results from today's poll question: have you faced discrimination at work because of your disability? The highest scoring answers were people said they were denied reasonable workplace accommodations, or they were publicly criticized or shamed, or that they were denied opportunities for greater responsibility. Now to our questions. Someone writes, I applied for a job that wanted me to take a personality test given by a third party. I have autism. Can a personality test pick up on my diagnosis? How should I handle this?
That's going to be a tough one. There are a lot of different personality tests out there. From what I've learned through my degree, they are supposed to have outlawed the ones that show bias, such as picking up on people's disability. I can't 100% guarantee that's there. I would try to ask them what personality test they're using. You could always go to, the ADA site. There's, it's in my resources. There's a site called JAN, Job Advocacy Network, that they do have a quick question answer you could ask them. What personally I have learned is to learn to try to read through those questions and unfortunately mask to my answers. That's about the best I can say on that. That one's a really tough question there.
Yeah. Someone writes, I'm autistic and I don't get nonverbal cues. My boss told me I need to get better at this during my annual review, but I literally cannot. I always feel like a lot of the social aspects of autism really don't have good accommodations. Do we have options here for this?
You do have options. You need to try to talk to, I don't know if you've disclosed or not. I totally feel you. I stink at nonverbal clues. I can be, totally oblivious to some things. I've had open conversations with my managers. Luckily, now working from home, I don't have to do it as much because most of us don't leave cameras on anyway, so I don't have to do the nonverbal cues. But when I did work in a workplace, I would talk to my manager and, even bring in documentation, or I'd sit and tell them, explain about autism. There are many people that have not, been experienced with it. We can't expect that, even though there's much more talk of autism, of ADHD, in the world now, that everyone has been able to, experience that. So in that sense, it's a good time to take the time to educate. If you want to bring an article to your manager to show them, or if you are able to talk about it, that is helpful as well. It just be, I understand you want me to learn these, but this is literally part of me that I can't learn them. It's not that easy. And number two, they're asking you to mask by doing that, and explain to them that that's going to take a lot of cognition effort from you. And you're not going to be able to concentrate in your work if you're having to worry about picking up these social cues. So it's taking that time to have that open communication with them. And in the end, if that workplace can't understand that, yes, we all need money, but finding that workplace that is going to take the time to work with you and understand your well-being is important to both you and the organization is where you're going to be, find your fit.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of these questions have to do with employers or managers who just don't understand the deficits or the challenges. Mm-hmm. And as such, they have expectations that are just not helpful.
Yes.
We have a lot of questions about when and whether to disclose. Is it recommended to do so during the interview or during the hiring process, to do it later? Do you have a recommendation for that?
I will say it's everyone's own personal journey. I would recommend now, and this is just through my experience, is to be upfront about who you are. If you are, you're expecting them to know you and to hire who you are. So how can they do that if you're not being, promoting yourself? And if you promote yourself up front, then that's going to give them the better opportunity to understand you. And yes, there may be jobs that choose not to hire you because of the disability, as much as that is illegal, but they have ways around that, unfortunately. Would you really want to work for an organization that isn't going to 100% accept you? That is not going to set grounds of a good, atmosphere. So like I said, it is going to be up to each individual. And maybe it's not in the very first, interview. Maybe it's right after they give you your letter of acceptance. But I would always say that the sooner is better, so that you can start right in the door fresh, really get going on understanding, transparency and setting the floor for your best and their best, access.
If you disclose to your boss, how can managers protect your privacy and enforce accommodations with broader teams who don't know about your disability?
That would depend on kind of the disabilities that you're asking. But like the simple ones that I said about asking for those meeting minutes, emailed you before the meeting, that can be very, under the table. Your manager doesn't have to go, say out to the world. They will usually get the meeting minutes and they can just quickly send, forward it to you, or they can ask that secretary that's providing them to, hey, just make sure this person gets emailed it. And they don't have to give a reason of why that is happening. And that's, why having that open communication with your manager, tell them that you're uncomfortable at this time with, please don't go announce it, but how can we do this in a quiet, way? And that's why I said is like having that communication. That's why doing it right off the bat is the best. So they can work with you.
Someone writes, I'm a supervisor. How can I encourage communication around this topic without outing any individuals?
It warms my heart to hear supervisors asking, and I did get to see a lot of these questions beforehand. It is opening that communication, talking about it. They should have documentation. Disabilities, if your workplace have it, if you've got one of those employee resource teams that does things on disability, have them come have a talk with your team. It's talking about it. And I mean, even if no one on your team has a disability, the more people that start getting educated and the communication is more natural, everything else will follow.
Mm-hmm. Someone says, I'm a director at work and would like to know which accommodations are most helpful for neurodivergent workers.
Maybe that person was in here. Now you're going to make me have to think about it. Personally, the headphones on, having, dedicated work time, where people understand that don't just come to my desk and pop in and give me a question. I mean, I will always let coworkers know, hey, if you need something, please don't come by my desk, send me an email or, send a text chat so that I can get to it when I'm ready instead of being thrown off task. Because sometimes for me, stopping and starting is one of the hardest things to do. I will totally lose my train of thought. and I'm sure I'm not the only one here that's, feels that way. So, and just setting those expectations and those understandings with your manager and with your coworkers.
Okay. What's the best way to approach a manager after you've overreacted to a situation due to impulsivity?
Yeah, that's a hard one. I've actually had to do that. It's, I mean, in any situation, even someone doesn't have an invisible disability, it's hard to own up when you've messed up. And it's just remembering, number one, to do it as soon as you can after you've collected yourself. Really look at yourself, what caused it. Ask yourself why you reacted the way you did, and then go have that open communication with your manager. Be like, hey, how I acted was totally unbusinesslike. This is how I felt. This is why I acted this way, and in the future, before I'm getting to that point, I would like to just be able to walk away without any questions asked. That is the best thing I've found, is to start, realizing myself when something's, if someone keeps asking me a question, I'll be like, hey, I got to go to the bathroom. I'll get back to you. Finding a way to nicely excuse yourself, to be able to go take a walk, take a breath. I've even had coworkers that, I really got to know well, and they would see my signs when I start clenching my hands up, turning red, and they'd be like, hey, Jess, let's go for a walk. So that's where I said it's like having that open communication, finding someone that can be your ally and help you out. Because sometimes we don't realize when we're getting overwhelmed, but if someone else can and can help us get away just for that few moments so we can gather our thoughts, we're so grateful.
We had some questions around masking. Some people asked what it was, how do we know we're doing it, and how do we unmask?
Oh boy, I'm still working on that. It's trying to act how is considered socially normal. So, I mean, you don't see it here on the field. I am sitting here fidgeting my hands like none other. You probably see me wiggling in my chair. And the masking part is me being conscious that I'm doing it and forcing myself to stop instead of just letting myself go. And yes, sometimes the things can be like, distracting. And that's why, when I did work in workplaces and, had to be in meetings, that I would ask if it was okay. Hey, I'm going to, stand in the back by the wall, but I'm listening. Don't worry. Or even that, I'll sit there and doodle. And I would just, let my manager know, yes, it may not look like I'm paying attention, but literally this helps me pay better attention. So the masking is taking away those things that help you regulate yourself and forcing yourself not to do them. So to unmask is being recognizable of what you're stopping yourself from, what is comfortable for you. I mean, start at home. What do you do at home that's, soothing to you? And what are you not doing when you're in your workplace? What are you forcing yourself not to do? That would be where you can recognize what you're masking and how to take down those barriers and find things that you can do in the workplace that'll help you soothe still. So it is complex. Yeah, I'm sitting here playing with my braid too. So. and
I guess it takes some practice and trial and error, what works for you, maybe bringing in something from home to help soothe you could help. Someone says he's looking for a job, and he says, how can we sell our ADHD as a positive thing? And how do we answer the question, what are your strengths and weaknesses? Which so many hiring officials ask.
Yes, I've gotten great with that one. So one of the biggest things to do is, okay, it's great. It's easy to talk about our strengths. I mean, you have great attention to detail. And I can't talk for everyone, but these are common things that having ADHD, we excel at. So attention to detail, being able to be, very concentrated on our work, very dedicated. And when they ask you about a weakness, always turn it into a positive. So my weakness is, and of course I'm going to blank out right now, is that I, you can say my weakness is that I was sick a lot as a kid. But I've turned that into, knowing how to listen to myself and, keep my well-being in a good positive light and be able to gauge things and know how to time manage. So it's a play on words, and always practice those at home, find your worst weakness. So even if they say, have you had trouble with this? You can find a way to say, yeah, I've experienced that, but this is how I've made it better. So it's always flipping it around into a good thing and not concentrating on the bad.
Someone asked, how do I explain to my boss that I need more detailed instruction to learn something new without risking that he'll think less of me?
I have learned that bosses actually like when you ask questions. You may think they don't, but, asking for clarification, and it may not be like right there. So you take the task, go look at it yourself and see if you can, sparse out what's needed. And then go back to your boss and be like, okay, so you wanted me to do this. I figured out, there's this A, B, and C. Is this the route that you'd like? Or could I get some more clarification in this room? In my experience, they've always liked when you're asking for that more clarification. It shows that you're thinking and working and want to improve and want to excel.
What can you do when a boss refuses to provide an accommodation for you?
Yeah, that one's the tough one. So if you have fully disclosed in your workplace, you should, I won't say do, but I think every workplace should have an EEO department or an HR that you can go to. But this is thinking that you fully disclose. If it's just between you and your manager and you haven't disclosed to the workplace, that is when you may have to totally disclose, because if you've left it up to just the manager and whether or not they want to help you out, they don't have to unless you've gone through the steps and gotten those reasonable accommodations. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Or try to talk to them and ask them, is there a different way we can do this? Am I not asking for this the right way? I just want to be the most productive and be a good worker. So there's different ways to go around.
Someone asked, is there a difference between disclosing to your boss versus disclosing to HR? If you disclose to your boss, do you also have to disclose to HR or vice versa?
No, you don't have to. If you're just disclosing to your direct manager, and you can work things out with your direct manager, that is fine. The difference is they aren't legally held at that point. If you have not totally gone through the paperwork with HR and, given them your diagnosis and, what you're able to do and what you would like the accommodations for that would help you to improve better, then that's where the manager can be like, yes, I'll help you here, but, and they can say no at that point. Until you are fully disclosed through the HR and EOE, then, things can be denied.
Mm-hmm. Do you need a diagnosis to ask for accommodations?
If it's just between you and your manager and they're accepting of it, I would say no. But it's when you go to the HR and you're asking for those direct written up reasonable accommodations, then yes, you do need a diagnosis at this time.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Because someone says, I have a direct report who thinks she has some degree of autism and or neurodivergence and has masked it. However, because she doesn't have a diagnosis, she would like to get diagnosed, but she's having issues with performance, and he's wondering how he should handle this as her boss.
I mean, as her boss, you can show that kindness. I mean, you can start that. No one's gonna, I wouldn't think your workplace shouldn't, discount you for wanting to help someone. If you're wanting to help work with her, and listen to her, ask her, okay, so you're having a trouble here. Where do you think, what are some steps we might be able to do? As long as it's not something you're going to have to go request funds from your company, like special equipment or something. If it is just things like helping her write out a daily plan or, allowing that flexible workplace that she doesn't get yelled at because she's 5 minutes late one day because she may be a half hour early another day, if that's something you can work with in the organization is, truly, that's where I said between, direct report management, if you can just talk with each other and work it out and be like, okay, these are the things that are going to help me. These are the things that make my, make me more confused and make my workday hard. And you guys can work through that, then that is great. I mean, that warms my heart. So please, yes, don't tell her no because she's not diagnosed yet, because that diagnosis sometimes can take a very long time.
Mm-hmm. Someone asked, have you used a mentor in the workplace recently, and how does it work? Does your manager assign them, or do you have to choose an individual? How do you know how to go about getting a mentor?
I've used it in a couple workplaces, so I can't talk about but both workplaces I have gone through the mentor program were very similar. So maybe most organizations follow this. So usually there's like, sometimes they'll have it online, or sometimes there's a meeting you can go to that, you're showing interest in having a mentor, and then you get your name put into their group, and they have several different mentors, and you kind of say, what you're looking for in your workplace, what's your strengths, they have you ask some different questions to, match you up with someone that helps you get to where you're trying to, go in your career. So I would look through your, organization or website, or go ask someone in HR, where's our mentor program and how do I apply to it? And they should, match you up with someone. And even if that first person they match you up with doesn't work well, they should tell you, if this one doesn't work, we can rematch you again. But each person I've been matched with were great and had some good, they're people usually that have been with the organization 10, 20, 30 years and really know the ins and outs and have, some great knowledge. So I definitely recommend the mentor programs.
Mm-hmm. Someone says, what if you're self-employed? Do you suggest we disclose to our clients? Would it help or hurt?
That one would take a little more of understanding what you do.
Mm-hmm.
You're lucky enough to get to pick your clients. So if it's someone that seems very unreasonable, yes, sometimes we need to make income, and being self-employed is not always easy. But do remember, you have the right to say no to a job.
Mm-hmm. Someone asked, he's a contract worker, a full-time employee. Is he legally allowed to ask for accommodations?
That one gets tough because it depends what kind of contract it is. I'm actually considered a contract worker myself, but I'm full-time employed by a company, but my contract, they'll go for 3 years, and then there's recompetes and stuff. But in my organization, yes, there is still an HR, an EEO, and I can ask for reasonable accommodations. I've been lucky that I love the company I finally landed with. I haven't even had to go through, the actual, all the legal steps like I have in the past. And all my management works with me and are very understanding. And yeah, it's been a long road, but in a great place now. Mm-hmm. So yes, there is a good light at the end of the story for most.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time. That has to be our last question. And we thank you for joining us today and for contributing your expertise to this ADHD community. And our free webinar next week is part 2 in a 2-part series on emotional dysregulation. It's titled, When ADHD Triggers Emotional Outbursts, Scripts for Your Flashpoints, with Dr. Sharon Saline. We hope you can join us. Make sure you don't miss ADDitude webinars, articles, or research updates by signing up to receive our free email newsletters at additudemag.com/newsletters. Thank you, everyone.